This video contains spoilers for episode 3 of Fiona and Cake. We saw in Simon Petrikov. After the intro sequence, we open up to a mysterious floating island. And no, this isn't the human island, and it looks like we've never seen it before, but what if I told you we have? Or at least it was planned to. This floating temple island looks very familiar to the one we would have seen in the episode, The Helmet of Thorgon. This was an episode outlined for season 1 of Adventure Time that never made it to the storyboard phase of production. But I mean, just look at this. They look almost identical. But I mean, just from the outside shot alone of this floating temple, there seems to be a weird fixation on eyes, specifically gold eyes. We saw it in episode 1, Fiona Campbell, and we even saw it in episode 2, Simon Petrikov. And we'll even get a better look at it later on in this episode. But as we cut to what's inside of this floating temple, it's Finn and Jake, the same Finn and Jake that we saw in the trailer. And who are they fighting? King Cockatrice. Now I gotta give myself some pats on the back for this, because in my trailer breakdown video, I pointed out that the background of where we saw Finn and Jake looked very similar to the shot of King Cockatrice screeching. But even the background of this temple looks very familiar, because if we zoom in on that creature on the bottom right, it looks pretty similar to the same creature that Simon had on his wall. But this entire first shot of Finn and Jake is so amazing because they even transform into the Jake suit, which is just a testament to their friendship, and that's how they end up taking out King Cockatrice with the Jake suit. However, another thing to talk about is Finn still has the Jake tattoo, which we thought he might have got after Jake had died. So what's going on here? It seems that Finn and Jake are still thriving, living their best life, going adventures every day. Something smells fishy. And sure enough, we zoom out and see that it's actually just Prismo watching Finn and Jake. However, this also brings up an important question. Is this just a flashback, or is this an alternate universe in which Jake is still alive? Well, if you remember from the last episode, it was very clear that Prismo is pretty distraught over the death of Jake, and that gets confirmed even more in this episode. As Finn and Jake continue to fight, Prismo grows a warm smile on his face, even choosing to ignore his responsibility with that pink button to continue watching Finn and Jake adventures. Now, going back to the question on whether or not Jake is alive, or this is just an alternate universe in which Jake never died, it's hard to answer the question without spoiling what happens in the next episode. But this more than likely is an alternate universe in which Finn and Jake are still living their best lives adventure. I know that kind of sucks without giving an explanation to my answer, but make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on episode 4's analysis and deep dive, because that will give a way better explanation on why I think that. But then we cut to the title card for this episode, Cake the Cat. And let me just say, I love the style that they're going for. Having each episode be a different character's name, and having each title card stylized in a different way in episode 1. But this time we get the POV of what Fiona saw. And this sets into motion pretty much the entire episode of what Fiona goes through. But then we come back to Simon's world, where Cake just jumped through the back of his head, and Simon is surprised as to why the ritual to open the portal didn't work. As Cake meows frantically, Simon realizes that he still has the translator that he ripped off of the dog. He puts the translator on Cake, and the first thing Cake says is Fiona, to Simon's surprise, because he thinks that there's no way that this is Cake. Now, Simon asks Cake how she got here, and Cake said that she followed a song and starts to hum it. Now, Simon's reaction looks very angry, and I don't exactly know why. Why would Simon be so angry that Cake followed this song in order to jump through a portal in the back of his head? Then out of nowhere, Astrid shows up asking Simon for her book back, but Astrid calls Simon Ice King. And that's another thing to bring up. How does Astrid even know who the Ice King is? Because when the humans first arrived, it was after the events of Come Along With Me. And after the events of Come Along With Me, Ice King reverted back to Simon. So the only way that Astrid could know about the Ice King is from stories. But from who? And why does she think the Ice King is so Fiona? And let me just say, this city looks amazing. I'm gonna say it, but I would love to live here. But as Cake continues her journey, she runs down an alleyway. And who do we see? Minerva. I guess it makes sense, but not only is this a little random, because this is the only time we see or hear from Minerva in the entire episode, but it's also pretty cool because that means Finn can go visit his mom whenever he wants to. I really hope we see Minerva more in the next episodes, and I really hope hope we see Minerva and Finn reunite once again. But as Cake continues down the alleyway, we see that the humans use these tubes as a form of transportation, which makes a whole lot of sense if you consider the history of the humans. After the Mushroom War, they fled to islands outside of Ooo, which eventually became known as the Hub Island. And what did they use for transportation on these islands? The exact same tubes. So it's cool to see all this technology that they're bringing to the land of Ooo. But then Cake takes a leap dive off the human island and plummets to the ground. But as she looks around, she spots the Ice Kingdom with its sparkly blue glow. And this sets into motion Cake's entire journey throughout this episode. For whatever reason, she still wants to go to the blue glow, even though she already went through a blue glowing portal that transported her into an entire different universe. And as you know, cats have 9 lives and always land on their feet, so Cake is fine. But as she wakes up, there's a butterfly with a smiley face on her head, which, if you didn't know, was the exact same butterfly that she dreamed of in the previous episode. And to give you a little context, if you didn't know, in the credits of every single episode, Fiona and Cake dream of something different. And in episode 2, they dreamed of the bone mask that the bear wore with a butterfly with a smiley face on top of it. And this is the exact same one. But as Cake becomes enthralled by the land of Ooo that she now resides in, she runs into the squirrel. And if you didn't know, this squirrel is from the episode Up a Tree. And we'll see more of the animals from the Up a Tree episode in literally a few seconds. But as soon as Cake is literally about to obliterate the squirrel, the ice thing flies overhead, heading to the Ice Kingdom. For some reason, I think this will be important. As we see, the ice thing only has 2 of the 3 gems from the Ice Crown, which, if you didn't know, is because of Come Along With Me, when it fell off of him onto a donut, and then he proposed to Turtle Princess. Now, in the Fiona Campbell episode 1 of Fiona and Cake, we see that the newspaper Queenie is holding has a picture of Betty and the shape-shifting Cake the cat, but it also has the Ice Crown with 1 of its gems. For some reason, I think this 1 gem that is missing from the ice thing and that is present in the newspaper is going to be important somehow. It could be to open up the Enchiridion to travel through all the different universes, as we saw in the crossover episode, but I think it's gonna be makes her super small, so they head off to the marketplace to find a strawberry that will make her big again. Now, this marketplace that they're traveling to is filled with Easter eggs and callbacks to Adventure Time. But before we get to that, we cut back to Fiona's universe, as she's frantically still looking for Cake. And if you couldn't tell by now, this new show is obviously rated TV-14, and I'm loving it. I'm also loving Marsha Lee and LSP. Something about their dynamic when they're talking to Fiona is absolutely amazing. But then again, Fiona is set in finding this blue portal that Cake jumped into, which makes total sense. I would do absolutely anything to find my pet that ran away. But as soon as Fiona says that, we cut back to Cake, who is absolutely enjoying her life in the land of Ooo, saying that she likes making decisions on her own. So as Cake and the squirrel continue their adventure to the marketplace, they get ambushed by the squirrel's ex-roommates from the tree. As you can see, they've definitely been through some stuff, but does the chipmunk remind you of somebody? At first, I thought Freddy Fazbear, but then I remembered the Capola gang from a regular show, and look at Dominic, almost identical. So a pretty cool reference to regular show. Talk about him. Right off the bat, we see this tree person from the episode It Came from the Nightosphere. Then we see this bush and leaf person from the episode James Baxter the Horse. Then this ant family who we've seen throughout Adventure Time before. And these last 2 characters, first, the balloon animal who may have been one of the balloons from the episode What Is Life. And finally this grass guy who looks very familiar, but I can't remember where he's from. Then we get a better look at the red ants and the leaf person, but another vendor pops up in the right, and that is another character from the episode James Baxter the Horse. Then we see Rainy, which was a character from the episode Another Way, and she'll pop up again later in this episode. Then the squirrel's boss looks like someone from the Wildberry Kingdom, and we'll see a lot of Wildberry citizens across the whole marketplace. Speaking of, this strawberry we see in the top left is an upper middle class Wildberry kid that we saw in the episode Furniture and Meat. Then probably the craziest of them all, we see Pillow People from the episode Pahoy. And if you remember that episode, that universe got KO'd by Golb. So how are Pillow People walking around the land of Ooh? Then we see another vendor who is another tree people from the episode It Came from the Nightosphere. Then we see another citizen from the Wildberry Kingdom, specifically the blueberry customer that we saw in Furniture and Meat. Then we see another person from the episode James Baxter the Horse, the speaker, and one of the rocks in the audience. Then we see a cutie from the episode Conquest of Cuteness, specifically this cutie right here. And then some weird green toast guy, no idea who that could be. Then we see somebody from the Slime Kingdom, along with another tree person. Then we see another vendor as a rock person. More specifically, it looks like the rock person that stole rocks in the episode Rattleballs. Then moving down, we see yet another tree person, but we see one of the spin and starts to sing. Now we see even more characters from the Adventure Time universe, so let's talk about them. First, this green guy is an old soft person who again we see in the episode Gut Grinder. Then we see even more vendors, the first one being another soft person from the episode Gut Grinder. Then we see Mrs. Goji Berry from the episode Furniture and Meat, and you might be wondering, do we see Mr. Goji Berry? And we actually do later on. Then the last vendor is a peanut person that we see in the episode Henchman. Then we see another strawberry person walk behind Cake, but this one isn't the upper middle class Wildberry kid. This is Chocoberry, because we can see the chocolate dripping down. Even the stump that Rainy is sitting on is either another tree person or the stump that we see in the episode Another Way. Even Shelby makes an appearance. As Cake runs up this tree, the last person she shoves off is Shelby. Then we get the debut episode of two new characters, Coffee Guy and the Burger, who will actually have voice lines later on in this episode. Then we see even more characters, the first being the Coal Man, the elderly man made of coal who appears in Memories of Boom Boom Mountain episode, followed by a mushroom with a mustache who I don't quite know who he is. Then we see another Wildberry citizen, this time Wildberry Chef, followed by Mr. Goji Berry, followed by the little cactus creature who also appears in the episode Memories of Boom Boom Mountain, then another peanut person from the episode Henchman, and another soft guy from the episode Gut Grinder. Then maybe another pillow person ominously smiling at us from the background. The inclusion of the Pillow People is such an interesting take, because like I said before, we had left that episode series. I'm very interested to see if the Pillow People or the Pillow World will have anything important later on. We finally cut back to Simon's place, with Astrid patiently waiting outside, and it turns out Chuscoos didn't die. Seeing the way Simon treats Chuscoos in this is kind of scary. We duct tapes his mouth shut, and we cut back to Cake in the marketplace. And there's even more characters to talk about. The first of those being the Hot Dog Knights, which we saw in the episode The Limit. Amazing episode, by the way, and so funny. But we actually saw the Hot Dog Knights in the official trailer, in one frame, right here. Then we see Jamaica from the Pup Gang from the episode You Made Me. Then we see one of the Cloud People from the episode Astral Plane. Then something odd happens when Cake starts playing with one of the Hot Dog Knights. And as she's kicking it up in the air, it teleports out of existence, very similar to how Prismo does it. Now this could be our first look at some foreshadowing the effects that Prismo has on the land of Ooh, and in fact every universe. Because if you remember, most of the Hot Dog Knights didn't make it out alive, so how are they here alive? Well, it could be that Prismo is pulling some strings that maybe he shouldn't be, and that's actually a huge theme for the very end of this episode and the entirety of the next episode. Then we see another vendor as a goblin from the episode The Silent King. Then we see a bushel of corn guy running away from Cake, which is some pretty huge foreshadowing for the next episode. Then we see this goblin offering up some fish, and he looks familiar, but I don't remember where he's from. Then we see the rock wizard from the episode Wizard Battle. Then we see what looks like the rock nurse carrying a cart of gems and stones from the episode The Chamber of Frozen Blades, and yet another pillow person. And oh yeah, did I mention throughout this entire time where I was pointing out past characters from Adventure Time that Cake was singing her song but destroying everything else in the process? Well, as she finishes her song, it finally catches up with her, and everybody from the marketplace is mad at her. Does it? He misses and dips. And as we're on the edge of our seats to see if Cake makes it out alive, we cut back to Fiona's world, and she's still looking for that blue portal to find Cake. She's been out all night hanging up these posters, but as the sun comes up, she ends off right outside Butler's Buttery Buns. And just as she's about to fall asleep upright on the side of a pole, Gary shows up getting ready for work. But Gary is over the moon to help Fiona find Cake. He even makes her a frozen triple shot latte. But as she looks down at her latte, she sees the ice and a blue glow starts to emit. Then she looks over at the fridge and it's glowing bright blue, which is also what happened in the first episode when Cake saw that the exact same fridge was glowing bright blue. So she jumps through it because after all, this is the same blue portal that took Cake. But how did this blue glow even start? Well, it turns out Simon tried the ritual to summon Gulb once again, reviving Chuscoos as one last shock. And with his mouth duct taped shut, it seems almost inevitable that it will work this time. But it doesn't. It still opens a portal to Fiona and Cake's world, meaning one of two things: that this ritual will never summon Gulb, will never summon Golbetti, or two, he was still thinking about Fiona and Cake. Whatever it may be, Fiona and Cake are now both in the land of Ooh. And Simon is in disbelief, in fact angry, and it makes a whole lot more sense in episode 4. Even the way he treats Chuscoos again is very scary and somewhat creepy. Even Fiona's fed up with it. She just wants to get out of this old side. At first, Astrid just thinks that this Fiona is cosplaying, looking for her cat that she saw run out of Simon's apartment yesterday. So, with all her fancy new tech in the land of Ooh, Astrid helps Fiona find Cake. But as we're zooming through this new human city, I want to point out a strange theme. There seems to be eyes all over this place in the land of Ooh. I mean, you can spot it almost everywhere, which makes me think that eyes are somehow going to be important, whether that be physically or metaphorically. We're yet to see. They end up finding Cake right where we left off with her, and her fate is revealed. Luckily, they didn't kill her, but they locked her in a pillory and threw tomatoes at her. I actually had to look up what this was, but yeah, it's called a pillory. Luckily, Fiona gets Cake out of it, and they finally reunite, this time in the land of Ooh. But they aren't out of the rough yet, as we hear the coffee guy's voice. And does his voice sound familiar?
Boo! No happy reunions for the criminal!
That's right, it's Jeremy Shada, the same guy who voices Finn. And it's honestly pretty refreshing to hear Finn, Jeremy Shada, voice another character in Adventure Time. I kinda like it. But then the green guy tells Timmy to go grab the bazooka. That's right, this marketplace has a bazooka, and they're about to use it on Fiona and Cake. But then we get this kick butt montage of Fiona absolutely slaying, and they both end the fight feeling somewhat familiar. That this feeling of fighting, in a way, makes sense. And as soon as they say that, Astrid realizes that these are the real Fiona and Cake, and just as they're about to go on another adventure, they get teleported by Prismo, which is something we saw in the middle of this episode. But if you know these episodes of Fiona and Cake, you would know that this episode isn't over yet, and there's gonna be an Easter egg in the credits, that being Fiona and Cake's dream. If you're new here, in the credits of every episode of Fiona and Cake both dream of something, and that something being different in every single episode. The dream in this episode seems a bit odd to me. It's a truck carrying apples with a wheel fallen off. Now, I know what the marketplace, but I don't quite know what the truck with the fallen wheel could mean. So please let me know. But I'm going to be covering every single episode of Fiona and Cake as soon as they come out. So if you don't want to miss episode 4 and the next episodes, make sure you subscribe. Also, like this video if you enjoyed, and please let me know if I missed something in this episode. But thank you all so much for watching, and as always, stay adventurous.